Hey, welcome to this radio video. This is the Propagation Solar Activity Report for August 14, report number 10. So it's interesting. This is my 10th report, which is amazing, going fast. Time really flies. And of course, we will continue to make those. I get really great comments, and they're different in the way they analyze. I find the reports, the propagation reports from different sources, like the ones given by Glenn Hauser and his World of Radio, are very straightforward technical stuff. So here we'll take a look, and I also want to kind of show and not just talk about why we have this and this type of propagation, and why we have and how it works, and showing the sun and stuff. So I think it adds a little dimension to the propagation reports that I give out. So we had solar flux steadily going down from last week, and we're now close to 100. Most solar flares did not flare, even though there were some chances that they would. And a lot of the little flares are the little sunspots, the ones that were kind of smaller, just disappeared from the surface of the sun. So it shows that the global output of the sun in terms of energy and magnetic disturbances is not really that strong. So on this morning of August 14, we have a solar flux of 103, K-index 2, which is good. K-index flirted a lot with 3, 4 this week. So it did really have some effect on the propagation. And an example is I tried 3 nights in a row to make a video showing you Radio Thailand, which was basically totally inaudible here. And the best I had was a very weak signal. I think it was on Monday night or Tuesday night. So it shows you that propagation really wasn't that great, especially for signal that tend to go through the North Pole. On my DXpedition the other day on Perry Island, if you looked at the videos with my Grundig G5, I was amazed. We talk about propagation and how bad or good it is, but one thing that I really notice is that if you go somewhere with a radio and that the noise level is really low, you actually get lots of logs and propagation. I've heard even number stations. I've heard actually 3 number stations on that the expedition. I only put one video out because it's the only one that I had time to just start the camera on my iPhone and film. The 2 others I kind of heard the last, I don't know, 15 seconds. So the time I take out my phone, start the camera, they stop talking. There was some signal there, but it's kind of boring to just show you a signal and say, oh, this was a number station. I kind of like to show the number station, the spy stations, when they actually talk. So when we have very low noise, we actually have really good signals. That is something that amazed me. And even though solar flux is low at 100, I noticed that signals even on the 16-meter band, for example, I heard BBC French from Ascension Relay Island on 17885 with a fairly strong signal on my DXpedition. So it shows you that propagation is actually quite interesting. Another interesting feature also of my DXpedition, we are now almost 2 months past the summer solstice, and it really starts showing up in propagation. We are getting better propagation from lower frequencies, and that is really something that we can hear for a difference. And one of the main things that I notice is that the 25-meter band is open starting at, I would say, 1830 UTC, 1800, 1830 UTC. We actually have great signals from the Middle East. I heard Turkey, Iran, and these signals are good and strong. So it shows you that the openings in the 25-meter band are now earlier in the afternoon. I even heard Turkey on the 31-meter band. India was coming in also quite well in 25. So in general, propagation is pretty good. The main problem that I see is that antenna and noise level is amazingly important to get signals. And that's the major problem of my QTH. If I had as low noise as I have in Perry Island, I would DX stations much more that now are just lost in the noise. So my observations for my DXpedition that was on Tuesday is that actually signals were really good. Not Tuesday, it was Monday, sorry. Signals were really good. So amazing. So apart from that, we have, of course, predicted solar flux. Apparently, that should actually get a little higher. I'm not sure. It depends on the sunspots, if we get more sunspots or not. The output of the sun is quite flat, as you see here, when the blue line at the bottom of this graphic are really on the bottom of the graphic, shows you that sun's global output is really getting flattened and low. One interesting thing that I looked at today was the fact, because we had our first day with 0 sunspots this year, the first in over 3 years, and it made me want to check the solar data. So I went to solarham.com. Solarham, great website if you want to have global news of output. First of all, you see here the sun. We have sunspot group 2139. That's kind of popping up a little bit here, 2135. These are maintaining a minimum of activity on the sun. One of the interesting things that I checked here was actually the monthly solar flux. So I went back down to this graph here, and we go into December 2010 as the farthest number, where solar flux average 84. And I started looking at the graph of average solar flux. Now we have a little peak here on November 2011 at 153. And if we continue on, you see that the averages for most months are like 110, 120, 135. And one thing really made me kind of look, because we had like a little downwards trend of 100, 111, so on. And behold, starting November 2013, solar flux averages for the months were way up. If you look here, solar flux average for February is 170. And that's interesting, because it's almost as if looking at this solar flux here, and I'm not taking any sunspot number stuff, it would seem we would reach like a peak on February 2014, when we thought that the peaks were kind of more in the past year or so. So are we still in a peak or not? It's kind of unclear on this solar cycle. We are in this really the lowest solar cycle I've seen in my 30 plus years of radio listening. That's for sure. This cycle is very weak compared to the other ones, where solar flux was 300. I remember seeing solar flux of like 365 in the 90s, and even in the last solar cycle. So it's kind of amazing, you have to make with a solar cycle that's not that strong, but it's strong enough to support propagation, good propagation, no problem. So February 2014 seems to be a peak of our solar cycle right now. And it's the highest peak of all, so it would kind of say that we've reached the highest peak of solar cycle 24 in February of 2014 this year, which means we are still close to the peak. So basically, the output 149 the month afterwards, and if you look at the sunspot numbers, they also show that this peak and is also in sunspot numbers. So I guess we did have our solar peak at the beginning of 2014, which is interesting to see. Now, so that's, I think, interesting to look at if we want to make a little look and see if we are or not past our peak. So I would say that we would probably have a peak earlier this year, and now we are going slowly to go down. But you know, a downward trend in a solar cycle is a few years. So I think we still have some good years, at least 1 or 2 good years left on this cycle for propagation. Looking at the sun closely, sunspot 2135, that was on the left side of this picture last week, is now on the right side. Didn't flare. Everybody was saying, well, I think it's going to flare. It didn't. Little group 2139, you know, when these groups have like multiple little spots like this, these are the most interesting and the ones that probably have the most chances of flaring very often. But apart from that, little spot here, I guess, and the rest of the sun is pretty quiet, as you see here. What propagation was in the past week? Pretty good, except with a little bit of unsettled conditions when the K index went to 4. What we'll have in the next week, I expect solar flux to, I don't expect it to go below 100 personally. That's my observations. There are some sunspots. I don't think it's going to go below 100, but it's not going to go up to 150 or 60 either. I expect solar flux to remain at 100 to 120. That's probably going to be the next week. No solar flares or anything predicted, but you know, we predicted that there could be some on sunspots, and there weren't. But the reverse is also true. I've seen sunspots flare with major flares, and they didn't think it would. That shows you how we just don't understand the dynamic and the physics of sunspots, actually. So no flares really predicted. So the K index should stay like at 2, 3, not really much more than that, which means that propagation in itself should be quite good, and even the K index could plunge to 1 or 0, which is the best you can have. So I think we should see great propagation for the next week if nothing new happens. And with solar flux, you know, 100 or a little more than 100, that supports even high frequencies. So we should have some really good stuff to actually listen to on the radio. So find yourself, you know, a dark spot. Find yourself a little space where there's not a lot of noise. You know, just a little park close to your home is enough. Just as long as you get a little farther away from the homes. You know, bring yourself a 10, 15 feet of yeah, a 10 or 15 feet piece of wire, and you know, just hang it there on a pole or post or a tree or something, and do a little listening and check out what you can hear. The differences between your home QTH, you know, with all the homes and the noise, and your spaces to in a park or when you get a little farther away from homes is really quite different. We live in an age where we have to make up for the high noise level. This is the age where lots of noise are in the HF bands. We have to live with it and not get discouraged by it. And it's easy to get discouraged. So hope you enjoyed this little propagation report and the look at our little solar cycle, where we are at actually. And hope you enjoy your week of radio listening. And thanks for watching. Thanks for the great comments. And hope to see you next week. This was Solar Propagation Report number 10 for August 14, 2014. 73.